an almighty crash. Every way that a deal can go bad, a profound potential for downside. It takes a lot of courage.
Welcome back to another episode of Passive Income Adventures, where we share you tips and tricks on how to get passive income from investing and how to actually live on it after you're ready to retire. For those of you who want to retire a couple of years early, you're in the right place. We talk about all things to have to do with finding your purpose after you've reached financial freedom, and most importantly, how to get there if you're not there yet. So we talk to entrepreneurs, investment leaders, people who are actually retired on their passive income, just sharing stories of successes, because the community that we build around this is really the most important thing that we're looking for. So if you want to reach out to about investing to us with us, make sure to check us out at partnerwithrise.com, where you can grab some time on our calendar. And today's guest we've got is Adam Gower. He's calling in from California. He is an expert in the real estate capital raising space and leveraging technology to get through to more investors so we can change more lives. And I know it sounds trite when we're doing sales, basically selling investments. But that's really what drives me, is helping people change their lives, because our lives are changed by people like you who were raising capital and taught us about this world. And in just a very short period of years, 5, 7 years, we were able to completely leave our jobs and live on passive income. So thank you for joining us, Adam, and thank you for what you do.
It's a pleasure to be here. And I will say that considering the context of the conversation, my life raising capital in the last few years isn't necessarily the most relevant, actually. I have been investing in real estate, I've been involved in real estate investment and finance my entire career. So I don't like to admit this. Anyone that hears me speak regularly know that I say this all the time, but I don't like to admit that I've actually been involved in real estate investment for over 40 years. I don't even like to think of that myself. So usually I just say over 30 years because that sounds more reasonable.
Yeah.
But it's all I've ever done, Emma. Yes, but happy to be here and thank you for asking me.
Yeah, I think we're going through a little bit of a down cycle right now. And we were at an event last night, and the speaker was asking, what parts of your real estate business have you just had to grind through and just make it work, even though it's been difficult? And my husband was like, raising capital from 2022 to 2024. It's been terrible. And I feel like there's just a lot of investor skittishness, not really understanding what's going on with the economy. Can you give us a little bit of your background, like how you've seen these cycles change over the last 30, 40 years, right? And
Yeah.
what you're seeing now? Are we actually in a recession? What is going on with investor confidence? I've seen it coming back now after the election, but just walk us through your experience with cycles and what you're seeing right now.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there, Emma. So I'm going to start with prediction. How about that?
Okay,
And
we love
then
the crystal balls here.
I'll try and explain as briefly as I can. I'm not very good at brevity, but I will try to explain a little bit about the context of why I think that this year is probably going to be a very good year. This and next, probably a very good year for real estate investing because there's going to be a lot of stimulus. We've got a real estate guy in the White House. So we are going to get a lot of stimulus for real estate, both in terms of deregulation of banking, deregulation of development. There will be lots of tax benefits that will be provided here and other stimulus for the economy of various sorts that will boost real estate, possibly even pressure on the Fed, whether or not that's a whole different discussion, whether or not that's a good thing, etc. But either way, it will be a good period of time to be investing in real estate. However, there will be an almighty crash as well as a result of it, quite seriously. So you've got to, the way to invest today is going to be for the long term. And in real estate, Emma, it really should be for the long term anyway. Looking for quick turnarounds. When I say quick turnarounds, I'm talking 3 to 5 years really is a quick turnaround. You have to underwrite, you have to invest for a long-term hold to hold forever. It doesn't mean that you should hold forever, but you should be underwriting to the assumption that you may need to. And
Mhm.
that's the only way really to navigate downturns. And downturns are inevitable in real estate. Okay, so background. My career really started pulling wires for an electrician when I was very young. So I worked on job sites, on construction sites, but quickly started raising capital for a ground up multifamily shop. And that was in the 1980s. And then what became known as the savings and loan crisis hit. So this was an implosion, basically, of the banking system that took with it the real estate industry. And that was at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. So I actually was very successful. I made a lot of money on paper.
Right.
I was a young fellow, I was in my 20s and I had millions. Well, I was a multimillionaire on paper. I had these partnership interests everywhere. And I spent my salary uh, complete. I didn't save anything because I thought all my savings are in this incredible wealth that I built up in these deals. And the whole thing evaporated. And I ended up going to Japan. I'd raised a lot of money from Japanese investors. So I raised about 30 million, so about 100 million of AUM in 1980s terms. It was all ground up multifamily. So I saw that. I saw how the market can literally implode, right? It just, everybody, there were very few people who came out of that unscathed in real estate, right? People,
Mhm.
everything that they had. I hadn't invested my own capital, was compensated based on the work that I was doing at the time. But people lost millions, hundreds and billions of dollars, right, in that era. So then after I ended up working in Japan, I developed, I ran a division of Universal Studios, right? And it's wacky, but it was a real estate division. Asia Pacific, I was responsible for in the 90s. So that's a whole different discussion about how to understand and see real estate underwriting really through the institutional lens. People throw these terms around casually, institutional
Mhm.
real estate, but there's the institutional real estate and there's not
Yeah.
institutional real estate, basically. I ran a real estate division of actually two institutions while I was in Japan. And then I came back and started doing my own work with my own capital. And in 2007, got lucky, really, in the sense that I sold my entire portfolio. So that was right before the global financial crisis. In fact,
Mhm.
I sold everything in the summer of '07, and Lehman Brothers, I think, failed in October or November. So literally, just literally before the whole thing really collapsed. And I was then brought in to one of my investors at the time. By the way, stop me. I can go on for a
You're
monologue. Got any
you're
questions?
good. I'm just taking notes with some questions down here.
All
I
right.
can monologue with the best of them, so I get you. Like, keep talking because our first real collapse, I remember the SNL crisis from when because I graduated in 94. And
Mhm.
I don't remember as a young high schooler going, what is the SNL crisis? Because you're hearing about it all over the news and trying to figure out what that was. Even as a teenager, that shows me just what a big deal it was that even teenagers were like, what is going on here? And then
Aware.
a homeowner and trying not to get laid off in 2008. And then a couple of years ago, I think it was probably in 2020, my 10-year-old, they have their own grocery budget. We take them shopping and they get to pick out what they want. And she comes to me and she says, Mom, I can't buy as many groceries as I used to be able to. I said, if a 10-year-old can tell what's going on here, then it's serious. So we're seeing these kind of cycles and just figuring out that you having lived through them as an adult, really educational. So please continue.
All right. Thank you. Actually, these cycles are predictable. But anyway, so where was I? So I sold out in '07.
Mhm.
One of my investors, so I had also raised money, even though it was family money. And one of my investors, actually, an old friend, was on the board of directors of East West Bank, who were at the time, second largest regional bank headquartered in California. So a huge bank. And he introduced me to the bank because this was the global financial crisis. They had done a lot of lending to real estate, so a lot of real estate collateralized lending, and were really struggling. So they brought me in as a kind of hired gun, really, a real estate expert to help them clean their balance sheet by divesting of these non-performing loans. That's a whole
Mhm.
other story. But
Yeah.
what I saw there was my first real exposure to hundreds and hundreds of real estate deals that had all gone bad. So I saw every asset class, every way that a deal can go bad. I saw sponsors who have survived in hindsight and what they did during that time that gave them the strength or the foundation to be able to rise again afterwards. And I saw sponsors who behaved in a different way and left the industry. But basically, it was extraordinary exposure to how things go bad in
Mm,
real estate. And I left the bank. You can ask their chairman today, and with a smile on his face, he will say that I did help at least to save the bank. I like to
mm,
say I did save it on my own, but there was a team of us. Being a real estate guy amongst bankers really made a big difference. So I left there and I ended up going over to what was then Colony Capital. They were the third largest private equity shop in the world, real estate private equity shop in the world, and had purchased and were purchasing what ended up being, I want to say, $7 billion of loans, non-performing real estate collateralized loans from failed banks in partnership with the FDIC. So I worked on those portfolios. My experience of real estate has left me an extremely conservative investor.
okay.
I place protection of capital as the number one driving consideration in all decisions. I do not want to lose money. The reason why investors are skittish is because the way that the market has evolved, Emma, over the last few years, particularly with new entrants to the industry, is that this awareness of the perils of investing in real estate have simply not been explained or visible until it actually collapses. Everybody talks about earn passive income. I'll be direct with you, and I'm happy to talk to you in these terms, or you can tell me to
Mhm.
shut up and be more positive. But people talking about earn passive income and build wealth in real estate, and you can this, that, and the other. Yeah, you can, but there is a profound potential for downside. It has to be
Yeah.
something you diversify into, and you have to invest with considerable prudence, ideally with a foundation of experience, expertise. And so the reason investors are skittish is because the reality of real estate was unapparent for many years throughout the entire history
Yeah.
of crowdfunding. So let's call it that.
Does does
Really
does this
24.
always
Yeah.
happen after a bubble, though? Because when we see crowdfunding and we think, "Oh, everybody's getting into it," funding is supposed to be a diversification tool because you can put a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there. But what happened? Did the crowdfunding create this bubble? And do people always get skittish after the bubble versus it's pretty typical behavior where they're like, "Oh, maybe I didn't know what I was doing. I lost money and now I don't know what to do." Or I'm
Yeah.
hearing horror stories.
Well, I'll answer that question first. So yes, investors always get burned and skittish during and after a downturn, but have very short memories.
Yeah.
So they come back strong and
Okay.
start investing again. So when the economy starts to inflate again after a downturn, after a recession, there's a lot of opportunity, but you've got to it takes a lot of courage to come back into the market at a moment when everybody else is looking at it, wondering that if the downturn is over. The GFC, we called it catching a falling knife. We would sell at the bank, I would sell loans at significant discounts because people thought they were bargains
Yeah.
against their current value. But a week later, they were worth even less,
Mm,
right? So it was, but folk that did take the plunge and made the investments did extremely well if they could hold on to it.
yeah.
But you asked me two things. Did crowdfunding, so it's a repeated pattern, people forget very quickly and jump straight back in. Now, there's no reason not to jump straight back in. You really should. With the lessons learned, make sure you don't make the same mistakes. And basically, that's just debt. Just if you really narrow it down, it's just don't work.
90% of the time, the deal goes wrong, it's because the debt is wrong.
Yeah, or the capital stack can really cause you problems if you don't
Yeah.
strike. But you asked about the contribution of crowdfunding. Okay, so that's actually a very interesting question. First of all, it's not crowdfunding technically. Crowdfunding was Reg D, Reg CF
Mm,
in the Jobs Act of 2012, Reg crowdfunding. Nine, the vast majority of capital formation in real estate since the Jobs Act of 2012 has been Reg D 506C offerings, not even Reg A. The Reg A has done some, but the
yeah.
vast majority has been Reg D 506C accredited investor. And yes, there's no doubt that in some markets, there has been an inflation of, but anytime liquidity comes into a market
Yeah.
that is easy money, inflates values beyond prudent levels. And so you've definitely seen that with a lot of sponsors who are new to the industry, exceptionally good at marketing, very compelling in their stories and their pitches, but whose substance, in terms of their experience and real understanding of the deeper workings of real estate, are naive. And so it has, look, you know this, Emma. I am
Yeah.
absolutely sure of it. If you've invested in any deals that have stopped distributions, had capital calls, or lost money, you're at the sharp edge of the issues. And those deals would not have happened if it had not been for the ease with which the sponsors were able to raise capital from people who also didn't know what they were doing, essentially,
Mhm.
into a story and to hype, instead of really understanding that the true way to invest is to think long term, like I started with. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now.
Yeah, I think I was lucky with our first deal that we syndicated because my partner comes from old money, like political money. And so he had a reputation in our local. I wasn't aware. We're not from Salt Lake City. I don't know who anybody is. So I just blind chance fell in to this partnership. And so our first limited partners had more experience than we did. They were GPs on their own deals. They were giving us really great advice. They were telling us what in the business plan we might want to adjust, that they believed in us and wanted to invest with us, but they weren't beginners. And I think that's just luck on my part that this happened to me and my partner. In fact, I didn't even really find out who his family was until after we were running the deal together, after we closed. And I was like, where are you meeting these investors? These are really high level, high caliber investors, all just old family friends. And, but getting into something where neither the investor nor the syndicator knows what's going on, it's been so much of the danger because they're getting loans that are popular right now, but may not have that long-term staying power. I've seen a lot, and I feel like we've been spared from most of that. And I'll put it to you this way. You mentioned something about being a multimillionaire on paper. And we found ourselves in the same position a few years ago. I always make the joke on the show that I can't eat equity. There's no equity debit card I can take to the grocery store and they will give me food in exchange for the equity I have in my properties. So a couple of years before all of this really hit hard, we had focused on having my husband leave his W-2 job and that we needed to start focusing on cash flow instead of growth and equity because we need to be able to pay our bills. So when you're a multimillionaire on paper, but you don't have the cash flow to back it up and you're not able to access that equity, what's the solution there? For us, it's been shifting asset classes to something that is not growing as quickly or as potentially as quickly, but is a more stable, low risk, and actually throws off cash flow. So tell me your thoughts there about how to protect yourself. It seems like
Yeah.
nowhere's safe. In the bank, it's
Okay. Look, so
need
I am
inflation.
not. I'm not a financial advisor, and all I can tell you is my own personal view
Yeah,
of
please.
that and the way that I deal with it personally. So I have a portfolio of stocks and bonds. I don't even know what they are, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. I delegate to somebody that I've known for 30 years, who I met when he was trading JGBs in Tokyo. Came and became a financial advisor in his wife's family's office, and I delegate everything to him. I have a conversation with him once a year. Actually, I talk to him more often, but once a year, he likes to call me because he needs to get affirmative yeses on the phone to do whatever trading he wants to do. And I always start those conversations with, before you ask, yes. Now let's just talk about the markets, what's going on. So I don't know anything about that other than it's handled well. It's performed reasonably well over the years. It's kept pace with the market and probably delivered a fairly decent yield over the years. So that's one bucket of money. Another bucket is real estate. I'm heavily weighted into real estate. And quite a lot of it is actually really long term. I invested in a deal in November that has no payments for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I'll put it in, it's safe, it'll do just fine, right, over time. And I've invested a few with that particular sponsor, quite a bit with that sponsor. Not all of them with such a
Yeah.
long distribution before it starts. But anyway, and then a bucket of money to that kind of investing and also to yield and growth, also all in real estate and across and across asset classes and geographies, but also two other streams of income. Oh my goodness. One is you got to work. What are you going to do if you don't work and make money
Yes.
somehow, right? I live in this beautiful town over here, surrounded by people who've retired and moved here for the good life. And when I talk to them, a lot of them walk around bemoaning the fact that they have nothing to do. They're bored and they reflect on times and the great things that they did in their life, but they're backward looking. And it's
Mhm.
depressing, to be honest with you. And I can't imagine what is retirement. I can't imagine not working in some way. So that's one field of income because what else are you going to do anyway?
Yeah.
And then the third is to keep a pocket, or however many I'm up to, fourth or fifth, is to have a bucket of cash, for heaven's sake. My financial advisor constantly telling me, well, if you put it in the markets, it'd be X amount, this more, and da da da, and whatever. Yeah, fine. It would have been, but I've been happy just keeping pace with inflation and knowing that I've got cash to fill any shortfalls should I need it if work slows down or whatever, even for little luxuries once in a while. By the way,
Yeah.
I wrote this a post on LinkedIn the other day about one of my cars just turned over 200,000 miles.
Yeah.
So, and I thought, am I the only person that holds cars forever?
No,
But,
I think I replied to that though. I drive a 2000 and we actually have 2 minivans, a 2005 and a 2007 Toyota Sienna, and
yeah,
I wrote a post about that for my comment there because my husband's dad was an auto mechanic. He taught in the small business program at the university where we met. And so he just drives his cars up to that professional shop that he grew up in. He has 3 brothers who live there who all have professional shops. And I feel like I'm going to drive this car forever because when I get up there and they're all working on the car together and that's what they're talking about, and I'm taking pictures of them like with their hands up in the engines. And I think this is a family thing that they do together. And so I'm going to have to drive this car forever. So it made me feel a lot better. And you have an
I
old
saw
car
you. I
too.
remember you mentioned that actually. You did comment, I think, on my. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I feel this reminds me of a podcast that I was listening to recently. It was an investigative journalist talking to a physician about exposing health and wellness grifters, the gurus who try and sell you all sorts of products. And they were
Mm.
talking about Brian Johnson, the guy who wants to live forever. And is he a grifter? And he said, I don't think he is. And the other guy said, if he's not, like, why is a billionaire shilling olive oil? And I just thought back, I was like, of all the things that you could come up with as a problem for this guy, a billionaire who wants to stay relevant, who wants to stay interested, who is doing what he does, which is find a product that fits with the market. He's not making a bunch of money off of olive oil, but it's keeping him engaged, active, and he wants to. You can't tell a billionaire, like, at what amount of money do you have that you're suddenly like, I don't need to do anything anymore. I'm just going to be happy on a beach. Like, never. So I love that you bring up
Well, I don't know about being
find
happy
something,
on a
whether
beach.
it's,
I mean, I think if I had unlimited money, there would be some things that I would do and would enjoy doing would keep me very busy and fulfilled. But the point I
yeah,
think I was thinking about, the point is that to answer your question, going back to your question, you got to live within your means, basically,
yeah.
and happy with what you have. And that's a whole nother field of thought, is pondering what makes us happy at the end of the day. And how do you dial into that? How do you live a life that is fulfilling if you want a life that is fulfilling? There's a lot of assumptions as well that you build into this.
That's
You know,
true.
some people might be happy with a bottle of whiskey sitting next to them and a pack of chips and sit in front of the TV for the rest of their lives. Right?
Yeah.
Whatever, it's entirely individual. For me, it is living within my means and being grateful for what I have and content with the life that I have.
Yeah.
And I used to ask my podcast guests what their habits were. And what I heard a lot would people say is, I get up in the morning and I have affirmations, or I give myself positive affirmations, right?
Mhm.
The principle is just to be consciously aware of how fortunate, how lucky we are
Yeah.
in the lives that we already have.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned at the beginning,
I
like,
came to an
that we're
end
gonna
there.
talk about some depressing talk about downturns and scary stuff, but what you just said there, you're like, "Do you want me to keep it more positive?" That's the whole point of what we're doing. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire who enjoys selling olive oil. It doesn't matter if you are the person who wants to watch TV and have chips. Like, we own a lot of properties, especially for our retired, tenants. that is life. Just people coming over and barbecuing on the porch. They wish they had more money to go do some other stuff, but it's not worth the cost to them to want to go out and build a new business or change careers or whatever. So they're just very happy with their community, with their lives, with their partners. And I watch that and I think having my kids in that situation where they're seeing people who are miserable and addicted and all of these things, and all the way from the tenants who are happy and living in their community and seeing this wide range of lifestyles and then hanging out with our wealthy mastermind friends and just really getting to think, what do I want my life to be like? And
So,
that's what
as
all that.
I was really into reading everything that I could find on the topic of happiness. What is happiness and how
Yeah.
people interpret it? I read a lot of books, and there was one by a fellow called Layard. It's actually, I forget his first name, Lord Layard, anyway. And it's called, I think it's Notes from a New Science or something. And what he did was he wrote this book that analyzed or reviewed all of the major studies on the concept of happiness. And he wrote it in the context of providing guidance to the British government on taxation, right? His theory being that you want to elevate everybody, the
Right.
population's happiness. You want to bring everyone's happiness up as an aggregate. So how do you tax and spend in order to be able to do that? So that was kind of
Okay.
why I read this book. But there was one study in there that was really cool. It's actually not a scientific one. And I'll mention it now because when you talked about your tenants and your kids, etc., I remember seeing this video of somebody in this gorgeous looking boat, right? 3 decks, and it just looks spectacular. So you watch this boat coming along, and then suddenly it starts to pass. And you just think, oh my goodness, what an ultra wealthy, amazingly rich person must be super happy. And then this boat passes by another boat that's 50 times bigger, somebody else's mega yacht. And you just think, oh my goodness, there he is. He's like in this dinghy going
Yeah.
past this other lot. So the problem is, how do you compare yourself? That's where you really start to fail, is thinking about other people. So this study was one that was non-scientific, but it was done at Harvard, and it goes something like this. Option A, you earn, and I'll pick these numbers out of my head, but you earn $100,000 a year, and everybody else earns 75,000, right? Just picking these numbers. So you earn 100, everybody else earns 75. Option B, you earn 150,000, so 50% more spending power than you did in option A, but everybody else earns 200,000. Which would you prefer? And most people actually go for option A. They would
Yeah.
rather have more than anybody else, more, but less than anybody else. And it's the problem where there you are living your life, you're loving everything, and your neighbor gets a brand new Mercedes. You just look
Yep.
out and you think, what's he doing that I'm not? I was happy until I saw that. Now I want one. And probably one of the biggest curses of social media as well, actually. See, I told you I can just rabbit on, so you do need to just stop me. But it's one of the reasons my wife decided not to stay on Facebook. She said, because everybody's so damn,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes me feel miserable.
Well, to me, it's a matter of curating without curating so hard that you end up in the echo chamber bubble of like-minded people. I think we see a lot that happen to a lot of very wealthy, especially famous people who they're just haters. I'm just going to turn it off. And they're not hearing any dissenting opinions. And so curating your feed to the point where you're in a bubble versus curating your feed to get rid of people who really just make you feel like crap. So it's always this balancing act. And I think what you're talking about, wealth and happiness, is also a balancing act. So it's good to hear it from somebody. Like I said, I like talking to people who made their money years ago and what their life looks like now. How are they working? What is their definition of happiness? I heard once that looking for happiness or trying to become happy is like eating so much at one meal that you never have to eat again. And so I look at happiness as an exercise routine where I need to work on it every single day to remind myself. This is why we do affirmations. This is why we go build ourselves up around community and positivity and also realistic, practical things. It's just, you have to work on being happy every minute of every day.
How do you do that?
You're naturally happy.
How do you do that? That's slightly rhetorical because I'm going to tell you how I think of it.
Yeah.
I've come to think of it, especially as I get older. And you talked about your listeners thinking about retirement and how do they finance their retirements and everything. So as I get older, it's definitely something that really for the first time is starting to come into focus for me, frankly. I went through large parts of my life pre-family, just thinking, okay, how much money do I have? And at my current burn rate, how long would that last me, right? Before I
Mhm.
run out. As long as I
Yes.
had runway, I always felt comfortable and I was right. So that's how I always thought of it. But I was always working and that was always a focus. But as I get older, and I've never really spoken about it in these terms, Emma, before, but I'm beginning to think about it, actually beginning to think about talking about it more frequently. As I start to see the end of the road coming up and able to really say, okay, I know that I have only 2 or 3 decades max left, and that I know
Mhm.
I've already lived through that type of timeline 2 or 3 times already. There's
Yep.
not much time left. So, what do I really want to do, and how do I want to contemplate capital and finance and chasing money, etc.? How big of a part of my life is that going? And one of the things that has become increasingly apparent to me, and it has been anyway for the last really 10 years since I started, and I use this term cautiously because I don't want it
Mhm.
to seem patronizing or condescending of anybody that I work with. But what I've learned is that I really like teaching and I really like helping people through sharing my experiences and my knowledge. And it's surprising to me, and again, don't mean this rudely, how little people know, it seems. And in the sense that it surprises me how much value they seem to gain from my sharing my stories. And again, it's not because I know a lot, it just reinforces the idea that when you do share what you've learned, and your experiences and really truly try to help people, it's actually incredibly rewarding because people like being helped and are very grateful, and it's reciprocally rewarding and joyful, actually. So,
Yeah.
anyway, I've been down a pathway that I haven't actually spoken before. I've only
Yeah.
thought it. But anyway, that's how my thinking is evolving right now.
That's what I wanted to get into, kind of what you're working on now. So put a pin in that just a moment before we skip
Mm.
to that subject. You mentioned something about institutional investors. Briefly give us the definition of technically we're institutional. We started a fund. It's an institution. We're a small institution. So when you say institutional, what do most people think of? What do
You
you
got to
think
be
of?
really careful. It is not institutional investing. Institutional
Exactly.
investing is, I'm serious, Emma. This is one of the things that I see that is a significant problem in the
Yeah.
industry and inevitably will lead to, I'm not saying you, but in general, in this capital allocator world, is the adoption of terminology that comes from a different industry or a different sector of the
Mhm.
industry that creates confusion. It just creates confusion because you're merging ideas that simply are not related. An institution, I have worked
Right.
for and with these institutions. They are staffed by career professionals who have done nothing more and within their professions have specialized in very narrow
Mhm.
areas of commercial real estate investing at an extremely advanced level. They are career professionals. And
Mhm.
for me, anyway, a useful way of figuring out, I can tell immediately. I see people, the, the way people talk in their posts, on their websites, in person, it's immediately apparent to me, okay, now this is somebody else. This is a different thing altogether.
Okay.
But the way that I generally look at sponsors, and again, because I want to do some investing myself, this year is I like to work with sponsors who I know in
Mm.
inverted commas. And what that means is, do I know, have I worked with somebody who has worked with them at some point, right?
Mm.
Somebody that I know and trust who throughout their career has had direct experience of working with this person. It's like you call it real estate, a different kind of geography, like human geography. And because then I know, because the people that I've worked with throughout my career, you know who are the real pros and who are sophisticated, truly loss averse investors and real estate professionals. And you could build a web of knowledge around somebody when you're in that kind of world. And I don't mean to be rude, but that is what institutional investing is. I worked with a shop that we sat and raised, I don't know what it was. It was the biggest fund we'd raised at the time. I think it was 1.2 billion or something. So the minimum buy-in was, honestly, I can't remember. It might have been 50 million, but that would have been on the extremely low end
Yeah.
of the scale. That is
Okay.
institutional investing.
Right.
Oh, and plus the other thing is an institutional investor will spend 100,000 or more on due diligence for any deal. I worked on a deal in Manhattan during when was this? About 3 years ago. So it was a skyrise that the bank actually asked me to help them sell 3 years ago. And the investors that came in some of them spent $100,000 just on due diligence.
Yeah.
And that is in addition to the time the professional team spent analyzing the due diligence that they actually put together.
Yeah.
It's a different world altogether.
Yeah, I'm glad that you make that distinction. I often make a joke. I think fund of funds is probably a better term for what
Oh,
people are
that
talking
is
about when
also misleading.
yeah. No.
Fund of funds. All of
Yeah.
these are borrowed terms the from the institutional world. And it is creating a fog of confusion. Seriously, I've been looking at this very closely for the
Yeah.
last. It is a serious problem. And the
So
other
what's the correct terminology? Because I joke and I say we're a mom and pop fund. Like we're your
perfect. So you could
friendly
say
neighborhood
that. That's
grocery
better.
store.
Yeah. So Emma, you ask a very good question. This actually is at the nub of what I'm working on at the moment. Everything. Everything is templated. So you can get
Okay.
templated offering
Just
documents, you
to
get
memorize
templated
everything.
emails, templated posts, templated articles for your website, templated newsletter. Everything is templated. Thousands of people go to huge conferences and all come away with the same templates. And then they amplify that sameness with AI. So now everything is being mass produced and it's extremely easy to notice, right? Actually,
Yeah.
it is, which is the problem. For me, it just leaps out. But it creates sameness. So how do you? Okay, so this is the line that I'm going down. Now, you weren't expecting this on this. Oh, did you give me a
No,
time?
this is actually great because I could tell when a guest gets fired up about something, it's time to just be fired up. Tell
Okay, good. I
us.
thought you
Like
gave me a timeout like S
just
the F
no.
you or something. Anyway,
Both of them.
okay, good. The problem is that it is misleading. And again, I'm not being
Mm,
specific about you. I'm talking about this industry, what I call the capital allocator industry, which is probably the best
okay.
term to
Okay.
use. It's problematic because it blurs the lines between seasoned career professionals and novice investors. And that
Mhm.
creates hazard for passive investors who simply cannot tell the difference. Right. So that's really important to understand. The other hazard that it presents is that a lot of what's going on is dubious from a compliance perspective. So there are
Mm,
some serious legal issues that manifest from this trend. Now, let's turn that inside out and ask you, as a capital allocator, or ask the industry, which is actually literally what I am doing down, is the mission that I'm on. Do you really want? First of all, the first thing you said to me is it's getting harder and harder to raise money. Why? Okay, investors are
think
skittish.
through it.
But the other reason why is because everybody is saying the same thing. Hey, come
Mm,
to me to earn passive income through real estate, build wealth through real estate, and retire with real estate. Everyone's saying the same thing. All they're doing is repeating the exact same thing. Everybody is
mhm.
exactly the same. You are not you, but these
Oh,
folks
no, that's
are
totally my
becoming
message, but it's born of legitimate, like, we did it, and we're not just talking about it. We don't run this business because we need the money. We run this business because we're passionate about
right.
helping people, and that's maybe the difference in the message, because it's like, if I'm not here talking about passive income and spending more time with your loved ones and having more control over how you contribute and find fulfillment, what is the point? What's the point? So I'd love to hear what those differentiators can be, because that is what the life that I am
That
living and the life
is
that I'm trying to share. But it's
Exactly.
the sounds the same as everybody else because it's the same message.
You become part of the machine, right? So it becomes harder and harder to raise money because you are like everybody else, right?
Mhm.
So how do you change that?
Yeah.
That is actually exactly the mission that I am on. Our clients pay us, I don't know, $100,000 or so to build systems for them and to advise them how to raise capital and to help them raise capital.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is, as I look to slowing down, not slowing down, but to change things up a little bit, I am going to be teaching allocators how to do exactly what we do for our private clients for themselves so they can raise more money. And the core
Yeah.
thread through that training is to identify what your unique value proposition is. What is it that makes you different from everybody else? And to open that up and to have the confidence to talk about it in in specific, clear details. So I was talking to somebody, for example, whose posts on LinkedIn, and by the way, I've been very heavily involved in LinkedIn recently, so I do talk about it a lot, but whose posts on LinkedIn all said the same thing: earn passive income, build wealth, and retire on real estate, etc. All the same thing, just shuffled around, basic. So I said to her, look, you come from an IT background and you're an IT professional, but you would never know that. I go to your website, I see you on LinkedIn. I've got no idea. I would have absolutely no clue that is actually your background. Why don't you talk about that? How do you see the world through the lens of your life experiences? Talk about those things. And what will happen? Two things will happen. One, you will attract other people who think the same way.
Yeah.
They will think this, like you talk about, helping, and I don't know, look,
Family. Honestly,
you're Chris. Yeah.
yeah, Chris
So
Borden. Yeah, I think you
I
interviewed him
yeah, he was
your
on my
show.
podcast.
And Chris and I are really about the same thing. He left a lucrative position to spend more time with his family. And so when we're drilling down, what is this about? I was a stay-at-home school mom photographer. There's no career that I came from where I have rich engineers or rich lawyers or rich doctors that I can go raise money for my former career. And even stay-at-home moms, it's just not fitting. But I realize most of the people who come into our fund are family people who really value their family more than their career. And that was where we were like, we're the family people here.
Look, I mean, a stay-at-home mom. So I have a stay-at-home mom. Actually, she's not a stay-at-home mom, but I have one of those in my household. Is extremely interesting to me. I mean, it's very different. Actually, fortunately, it's not very different
Yes.
from a financial perspective as mine. But in terms of the way that she interprets life and sees life and thinks about raising the kids, as again, I don't want to patronize or anything, but taking you as an example, talking about the challenges of raising kids and the lessons that you learn when you raise kids, etc. And then dovetailing that in a subtle way or transitioning that into discussing this passion that you have for real estate investing will attract other people that think the same way. They will lock on and they'll think, gosh, she is like me. I am like her. I relate to what she does. And I wish I had the gumption to go out and do what she does with real estate, but I really love the success that she's got. So, you know what? I'm going to invest with her. That's how you separate yourself from
Brilliant.
the crowd, not just taking a template and amplifying it. Oh, you can create 100 pieces of content with AI from just one article. And I got it
Yeah.
from a template for a conference that I went from, and I'm going to push all that out. Talk about who you are, your experiences, your view of the world, and you will
Yeah.
attract other people like you.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're talking about from a compliance standpoint as well. Because was, like I said, at an event recently, and there was a securities attorney who was presenting. And before the meeting, we were talking about what I talk about on LinkedIn and what's in our PPM matches. I said, but then we came across this deal that didn't match and we wanted to do it. So just the owners went into the deal because it didn't really match our buy box. So we just put our own money into it. But then we invited a couple of our repeat investors in with us. Like, you don't have to do this, but this is a deal that you can participate in. And the lawyer was like, "What's in your PPM?" They look at what is just as much as what you're posting on social media. So if you're like, "Oh, we do this," and then you do something that's not that, he said, it gets really gray area from a compliance standpoint if you're saying one thing. So I think this is where the templates become dangerous because it's not really what you're actually doing.
So there's one guy who is who's become very visible online, who obviously I won't talk about, and we certainly wouldn't
Or
name
specifics.
this fellow. It would be extremely indiscreet to do that. But who came to me some years ago and was just starting in investing in real estate. And he said to me, okay, and it was ready to hire us. Again, when I say we're not low ticket
For
people, we're not a low ticket shop. But he was ready to hire us. And he said, okay, this is what I want. I want you to create a persona for me. No experience
Mhm.
in real estate. I come from I think he was an IT background, it's quite honestly engineer or
They're
something.
all IPs.
And he wanted me to create a persona of a world-class real estate expert, articles for him instead of based on his background and knowledge and insights, which is what we do.
Yeah.
Tips and learnings and insights and philosophy and investment strategies. But he wanted me to create one for him. And I just told him, no, I'll tell you what, why don't you I've got a paid course, a video course. Why don't you take that? Because I'm just not going to take you on as a client. And it
Mhm.
was obviously unhappy. Yeah, I think he took it offensively. But he's gone on to do just. I even saw him on one ad in advertising to physicians wearing a lab coat,
Right.
like physicians thought, wait, so you're acting a role. It's appalling to me. I can't do that. I don't want to touch it. But anyway, I'm not sure. I went off on a soapbox line there. But that's the point. You've
No,
got to have the confidence to be yourself and to talk about who you are truly, because if you don't, at some point in the narrative, or in some point in the investor journey, people are going to realize that you're fake and
yeah.
they'll lose confidence in you instantly. And if a deal goes wrong, you will be in legal jeopardy for
Yes.
having misled them on their pathway to sending you a check. So
Yes.
it ties together ultimately. Better to be authentic for a lot of reasons.
Yes. And
Anyway,
I
we're
I
at
learned
the
a
top of the
lesson.
hour here, so we should start wrapping up.
Yeah, I feel like I learned that lesson when I was hosting a data science meetup when I was a marketer. I did graphic design, marketing, photography, that like just branding. And I'm thinking, oh, I could probably find some investors. My husband worked in data science. I work for this data science company as a marketer. I could talk data science with these guys, not at a deep level, but enough. Like we're going to raise some capital from these guys for the real estate. But then I had to talk about data science with them because we're at a data science event. They're not there to talk about real estate. They're not there to talk about finances. There to talk about Python. And I'd be standing there, I really don't want to learn how to speak your language. I'm just
Mm,
not interested. And I realized it was just the wrong pond to be fishing it in early on because I didn't want to discuss what they wanted to discuss. We didn't really have a whole lot in common. They were usually single guys. They didn't have a stay-at-home wife. They just did not understand my world and I didn't understand theirs. So being authentic is also going to just be more enjoyable because you can talk about stuff you actually want to talk about
I
with your
know
investors.
well. Exactly. All
Yeah.
right, go on.
What's the name of we mention your podcast briefly.
So
Sure.
the podcast this season is actually focused on allocators.
Okay.
I really want to help allocators. So I think it actually provides an incredibly useful function in the industry. So I'm going to be
Okay.
taking allocators probably in end of Feb and March. I've got a couple of
Okay.
masterminds that I'm going to be doing. So the podcast is called The Allocator, a new way to finance real estate. But really just want to go to gowercrowd.com. And if I can be so bold as to suggest subscribing to my newsletter, there's a
It's a
big
good
subscribe.
newsletter.
You can see some of the people or some of the companies my subscribers work for on that page. And you can always unsubscribe, but it comes out once a week. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
going to
Be sure to follow you on LinkedIn because you're one of the few guys that writes your own LinkedIn stuff. And it sounds
do.
like actual human behind it, which is ironic to me in a way because you talk about how to harness AI while still maintaining yourself. And so you're writing your own stuff, you're a real person behind it, yet talking about how to leverage the technology and not very everybody who's talking about AI is a real person. They're not using AI to write their own stuff, which to me is the irony. And then somebody who's not in AI will start using it to sound like a
Mm.
cookie cutter. So definitely follow you on LinkedIn because I feel like you're a real person. You hang out there, you answer your own phone, so to speak.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you can tell.
Yeah, I use AI in my stuff, and, every once in a while, I'll post a joke post written completely in ChatGPT, making fun of ChatGPT, seeing if
Mm.
anybody can pick up on it. Here's the thing, let's delve into the exciting world of it just to see if anybody notices because they don't. And if they don't know how to tell what it is, then they're going to be sucked in by somebody who is really not a real person and they're just using AI for everything. So it's an important message. And I loved your reflections on happiness and how the pursuit of that and the pursuit of money and finding fulfillment, all of these have a role in our lives of earning passive income or earning a way to support our lifestyle and then earning our way into fulfillment and happiness. So it's your perspective is spanning those decades, very useful for our listener because we all struggle with these same issues no matter where we are on
Mm.
that path. So thank
If
you
we're
so much
thinking,
for this.
thanks for having me, Emma.
All right. Thank you so much. Be sure to reach out at gowercrowd.com. And again, if you want to jump on a phone call with us, partner with rise.com, and we can talk to you about all these kinds of issues and help you figure out what kind of lifestyle you want and how to diversify. We don't want to be the only place you invest. We don't like investors who don't know how to diversify, but we would like to be one of the people on your list that you trust and invest with. So I appreciate you listening. And until next time, we'll see you and hear about your next passive income adventure.